Hello, and welcome to this very brief tutorial on how to create a virtual world within Unity Game Engine. This tutorial is for those who are interested in virtual production and want to learn a little bit about what goes on behind the scenes in making the actual virtual worlds. This is an absolute beginner's tutorial, so it won't teach you any of the more advanced techniques, including how to do camera tracking. This is just about putting down some terrain, finding assets on the asset store and importing them to your virtual world. So it's an absolute beginner's tutorial. First off, I'm going to quickly talk through the layout of Unity Game Engine on the screen. In the center here, we have the scene window that shows us our game world where we can see what we're placing, and we can also navigate around it as well by using the move icon here and our keyboard. We have another tab that shows us the game world, which essentially shows us what the camera can see. On the left here, we have our hierarchy tab, which shows us a list of all of the assets being used within the game scene. On the right here, we have the inspector. So this shows us the properties of whatever we have selected in the hierarchy. So I've selected the main camera here, and on the right under the inspector, we can see the properties of the camera. So it tells us everything about the camera properties here. Underneath then, we have the asset bin and our project bin that essentially are repositories for any assets we're going to use in our game that we haven't yet put in our scene, or even those that are in our scene. So first off then, you need to create a new 3D project. So when you load up Unity, create a new 3D project, which is what I've done here. And it's created a new 3D project that's empty apart from our main camera and our directional light. So first thing I'm going to do is show you how to add terrain to our scene. So terrain essentially is the ground or the topography of our virtual world. Okay, so to do that, we're going to create a new game object. So that's something that's going in our scene. This is a 3D object and this is terrain. So go game object, 3D object, terrain. And it's going to create a checkerboard here for you. So this is the default texture that goes on the checkerboard texture, and it just shows us this is a flat plane. So this is our terrain here. On the right under the inspector, we've got the terrain settings. You can see there's 5 little pictures here, and as I hover my mouse over them, each one of these is essentially a tab. So we've got create neighbor terrains, paint terrain, paint trees, paint details, and terrain settings. So I'm going to show you what all of these do. So first of all, we're going to start with terrain settings. So at the moment, our terrain's quite big, and I want to make it a bit smaller. So I'm going to scroll down to terrain width and terrain length. And I'm going to create this, change it to 200, so it's roughly 1/5 the size it is now, or maybe even 150. Okay, next what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the arrow tool here, and this is going to enable me to move my terrain. Now when I click the arrow tool, whatever I've got selected under my hierarchy will have a arrow appear with 3 different coloured arrows, red, green and blue, and those are to show the directions that you can move something. So I'm going to move my terrain over using the red arrow, and I'm going to bring it using the blue arrow this way a little bit. There we go. Double click on my camera to zoom back in, a little bit fiddly at times. Okay, so we've got our terrain now, it's about the right size. What we want to do is create some topography on it. So I'm going to click terrain again. On the tabs here, I want to go to where it says paint terrain. So paint terrain, give that a click. So this is essentially for setting the height or the topography of your terrain. Just like in Photoshop, there's a set of brushes here, and if I hover my mouse over the screen there over our terrain, we can see that there's a little blue brush. Okay, so I can change the brush size. So if I make this one bigger, well, you'll see that's bigger than my actual terrain there. And I'm going to go for a natural kind of brush here. So as I click and start moving, you'll see it starts changing the topography. Now I'm going to change the height of the topography and have some bigger topography further back in my scene. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. So I'm holding down Option, Control and Shift on my keyboard there. Command Z to undo because no one do that. just want to create essentially just a more interesting landscape. And for the purpose of this terrain, it's going to look a little bit taller at the background there. And let's use a different brush to add a little bit more visual interest in there. There we go. So I've created some more interesting topography now, so it's not all kind of the same. Next thing we want to do then is we want to add some grass and some trees. Okay. To do that though, first of all, we have to go to Unity's asset store to find them. We're going to find some free ones, and then we're going to download them to our scene. So to go to the asset store, we go Window, Asset Store. And the asset store is great. It's essentially Unity's shopfront where its users can buy and sell different things that they've made for their virtual worlds. So I'm going to search for some free grass. Now, here you go. So what we can do is under pricing, if we click free assets, it'll only show us the free ones. And you can see there underneath each asset, it's got a price on the bottom left. So it says free down these ones. Where it's grayed out, those are ones that I've downloaded earlier. So say, for example, let's find one I'm interested in. Here you go, free stylized nature environment. Okay, say I'm interested in downloading this one. I'd hover my mouse underneath it where it says add to my assets in blue, give it a click, brings up a pop-up window, I click accept. Likewise, if I wanted some free trees, just do exactly the same again. There we go. So now that I've got them off the asset store, what I need to do is I need to import them into Unity using the package manager on Unity. So to do that, go back into Unity, go back to Window and go Package Manager. Now when Package Manager first opens, it might show you the in-project assets. That is the assets that have already been downloaded into the project. What you want to do is change it from in-project to My Assets using this little drop-down window here. And then find what you want to download to your scene. So here you go. So grass flowers pack. I'm going to use this for the grass. Now, the first time you use it, you'll have to click the download button first and it will download them. Once the download is complete, you'll see a little progress icon going up to 100% at the bottom here. Once it's complete, then you click import to import it in. It comes up saying, do you want to import all this stuff in? And you go import. So that's grass. Now let me find some trees. Let's import that in there. This is just saying there's been a small error there. So I'm just going to click yes, Karen, doing what you're doing. So there's two assets that I've added to my project now. And you'll see at the bottom here, on the bottom window under assets, you can see nature starter kit and grass flowers now. So I'm going to select my terrain, and what we're going to do, we're going to paint some grass on now. So go back to your terrain options on the right under inspector, go to, first of all, we'll paint details. So paint details is where we add the grass. Underneath you it says details, no detail objects defined. That's because we've not added a grass texture essentially. So I'm going to go edit details, add grass texture. Comes up with a pop-up window. What we want here is detail texture. It says none to texture 2D. Give the little arrow a click and we have to scroll through now and find where our grass textures are. So it shows me some thumbnails of the images that I'm looking for, and here we go. Here's what I'm looking for. So let's go grass 02. Double click it and click add. So now we've got our grass texture there. I can have as many of those as I want. So I'm going to add another couple in just to keep a little bit of visual interest. Let's go. And then I'm going to select them one at a time. And again, we've got the brush, so I can change the size of my brush to make it smaller, or I can make it larger. And we've also got the opacity and target strength, which decides how many of the texture objects are placed. So you see at the moment it's not placing loads as I go over. And we'll put a fair few of those down there. I'm going to use my hand tool now to go over, zoom in a little bit. And we can see there's more place there. That's what we call draw distance. So it just wasn't drawing them for me to see. Nothing to worry about. And we're going to use those other grass ones just to add a little bit more difference in amongst it in places. So let's have a look. So if I go to my game window now, we can see what the camera's seeing at the moment. So I'm going to double click on my camera here, and I'm just going to move it around a little bit. And use the rotate option to rotate that around. So the next thing we can do then is we can add in some trees. So I'm going to select the terrain again. And this time I'm going to go to the paint trees option here in the center. Absolutely the same where it says trees, no trees defined. Go edit trees, add tree. Tree prefab, none. So let's click it and let's find a tree. So these are ones in those assets that I downloaded. Select that tree there first of all. Increase my brush size and we'll put the density down a little bit. There we go. So I've added some trees there. Add some more in the background. I have a few more further away. And again, I can have as many trees as I want, so I'm going to add in some different ones, just because otherwise it would get boring. Turn the colour variation of this one up. Let's add another tree. These little bushes. Now let's find where my camera is. There it is, right in the centre there. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to add a few more bushes in the near distance. Just to make it feel like there's a little bit more going on near where it is. For some reason it doesn't like that tree. So let's get back to our main camera now. And we can see if we move it around a little bit. There we go. Our game world's actually starting to come together a little bit now, our virtual environment asset. So one last thing I want to teach you. So you've done some terrain now. You've added grass, you've added trees. I want to show you how to import another asset that you want to have for your game that's not grass or trees. So buildings, cars, whatever it might be that you need to kind of create your virtual set. So again, for this, you'd go to the asset store and you'd search for what you wanted. So I'm going to go to the asset store and we'll just we'll have a look for buildings, or building, I should say. Again, free assets, give that a tick. So here's some free assets we can download. That looks pretty cool. I'm going to add that to my assets. Medieval village building kit. That looks pretty cool. We'll add that to my assets as well. Building shed. Interesting. Let's add that as well. So go through, find some assets that you want to add, and then again, go back in, go to your package manager, refresh it. If you can't see everything on there, click load all. Okay, and then find those assets that you just downloaded. Old building, there we go. So let's download that now. Import this one in that I'd already got. Building shed's done. Let's import that one in as well. And let's import that in as well. At the minute, we've been painting essentially models and textures directly onto an environment using the terrain tool, but we're going to do something different this time. This is assets that aren't essentially for the terrain creation tool. So what we can do is go down to the bottom under your project window here. We've got the assets folder that's got all our assets in, and you should see now we've got building shed, cabin, and old building. So let's open building shed. Let's go into models, double click it, and there's our building, our shed. So I'm going to double click my camera, let's zoom in on where my camera is a little bit so we can get to see it. And just move that around a little bit. So essentially my camera is pointing its frustum, and you can kind of see it there. It's so big, see the frustum there is pointed that way. So I'm going to place my first building there. So I've got the building shed underneath the assets here. So I'm going to go models, building shed. I'm going to drag that on. I'm going to place that. There we go. So if I go into my game now, we can see it there. Put it up. Now I can use the move tool to move it around, obviously within the environment. I can use the rotate tool to rotate it within the environment. And you could go all different directions for that. And I can use the scale button here to scale it. Now, if I use the scale button, best thing to do is uniform scale. So hold the white scale button in the middle to scale it up. Now I'm going to place that scaled up building there. There we go. Now it kind of looks like the forest has grown up around it. That's looking good. So I can do that for any asset I've got. So any kind of model or asset thing. So let's go in cabin. That cabin looked pretty cool. So let's drag that cabin in to the background there. And now let's make that bigger as well. So that's looking pretty good. Let's just turn our camera around so we've got a bit of a view of both of them. If we look at our terrain, we can still see that white and grey checkerboard texture is on the terrain. So I want to get rid of that and replace it with a grass texture underneath so that the 3D grass kind of blends in with the floor a bit more. So we're going to select our terrain, and then we're going to go to the set height tool. And underneath there, you see it says set height. We're going to click that, and it brings up a drop down menus. We want to paint texture. So we're going to select paint texture. And what we're going to do here is we're going to go down and we're going to go edit terrain layers. And we're going to go create layer. Now under the create layer here, we're going to look for a texture as in an image file that we want to use for essentially the ground. So I've got a couple we could try. We've got mud and we've got grass. So first of all, let's try the grass. So I can see that it's called download the actual file. There it is. So I'm going to double click that. So if we have a look now, we've created kind of a mud texture. Let's go back to our camera view. That's not too bad, but it looks really blurry. So I'm going to go down and tweak the settings. So with that selected, I'm going to select the mud texture here. I'm going to go double click. Oh no, edit terrain layers. There we go. Open. I need to use that little drop down menu there. And here we go, the tiling settings. So this describes how the image file is tiled over the terrain. So at the minute it's 2 by 2. I'm going to try and increase those numbers and just see what happens as I kind of distort them a little bit. Let's zoom in a little bit on some of that mud if we can. It's not really showing it on this one. Let's go back to our game view there. How's that looking? It's got a bit more definition, but it's still not great, is it? Play around with the X and the Y settings. Try and orient it a little bit more. That's not too bad. So that's okay. Let's try a different one then. So let's add a new terrain layer. And let's try grass instead. And let's remove that layer there. There we go. So we've got grass. Automatically, that looks better to me. Yeah. There we go. That looks much better. And now we've got rid of that horrible grey and white checkerboard. And actually, at first glance, it looks a bit more realistic now. So with a few more different types of grass in there, that would actually be looking very good. So I hope that this tutorial on how to create a virtual world within Unity has been useful. If nothing more, it's very important to understand a little bit about virtual production, how it works, because even if you decide it's not a skill set you want to acquire for yourself, it's still useful to understand the pipeline and the process that it goes through, the different stages. So this is only very much scratching the surface of how virtual sets or virtual worlds are made. Good luck with your own terrains. I look forward to seeing what you create.